To the regal part of the programme, we love it. Joe Biden was treated to some classic British pomp and pageantry at Windsor Castle today as he arrived in the UK on a whistle-stop tour to meet King Charles and Rishi Sunak. So brief was his visit, the US president has now already landed in Lithuania for a NATO summit, but not before enjoying a cup of tea with His Majesty the King. Joining me now, TalkTV's royal editor Sarah Hewson. Good to see you.
Lovely to see you too, Vanessa.
So he came, but it was pretty fast.
A flying visit,
yes.
I think we can call it. This wasn't a state visit. This was a stop-off on the way to the NATO summit in Lithuania. Earlier, he met the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak at Downing Street and then went on to Windsor. But still, as you described, the pomp was laid on for him because he received a royal salute. The US national anthem was performed by the band of the Welsh Guards for him. And then he went into Windsor Castle for tea with the King. Now, the relationship is said to be warm between them, but we know that Joe Biden has privately alluded that he's not the biggest fan of the English monarchy. He's a proud Irish American.
Yes.
He had great respect for the legacy of the late Queen, and he also respects the work that the King has done on climate change. And that was the substance of today's meeting.
So we don't know much about what they would have chatted about. We don't know whether there's meant to be a special relationship still or whether Joe Biden's a proud Irishman. I know I happened to be in Ireland when he was in Ireland. My God, did he make a great deal of being, a son of the Irish soil and the horny-handed son of Ireland every single second. He really did. So maybe it's not his favourite thing to have tea with the King.
Well, on that subject as well, they will have common ground. Both have a great love of Ireland,
yes.
And on climate change. And so in a 20-minute cup of tea, they talked about that issue primarily. That's what the meeting was about. They also received a joint briefing from Grant Shapps, the Energy Secretary, and from John Kerry, the US Special Envoy on climate change. And it's not their first meeting. They also met at COP26 in 2021. And at that point, Joe Biden was overheard by cameras saying to the then Prince Charles, "We need you on this issue."
Oh,
He was here again for the Queen's funeral, but of course he didn't come for the coronation. He sent his late wife. And so this is their first formal meeting since Charles became king.
Well, let's hope they had some good scones and let's hope they put the jam or the cream on first, whichever is the right thing to do. Let's talk about Prince Harry and about the visa situation, because this was quite controversial. This is all about what he wrote in his book Spare about drug use.
Yes, he admitted in his book Spare that he had taken marijuana, cocaine, magic mushrooms, that he'd experimented with the psychedelic drug ayahuasca to help deal with trauma during some of his therapy sessions. Now, there is a conservative think tank called the Heritage Foundation in the United States that has put a Freedom of Information request into the US government, the Department for Homeland Security, to find out what Prince Harry said on his visa form. Because when you apply for a visa to enter the United States, you are asked about drug use, and you're asked two questions: whether you've ever been a drug addict or abuser, and whether you've ever been convicted in relation to drugs. And they want to know whether Prince Harry answered honestly on those forms, what he said, or did he lie? And they want to know whether the US government, the Biden administration, gave him special treatment because of who he is. Now, that request has been rejected again today. They've been told that because he's in a public figure doesn't mean that and so this rumbles on.
OK. I didn't say I was going to ask you about this, but I was quite interested in a piece I read about Kate, the Princess of Wales, introducing the children to how to behave in public life and the right way to conduct themselves in public and also among different sorts of people from different kinds of backgrounds through their interest in sport. Did you see that piece?
Well, we know that sport is a massive thing for Kate. It was for her growing up. It's also something that she believes very strongly in for young people.
Yeah.
And it ties in with all of their work on mental health. But it makes sense that she's using their love of sport as a way of introducing them to their public lives. For example, we've seen George at football matches.
Yes, very sweet.
And they know that the cameras are on them. And, children don't always do what we want them to do, do they? And it's very difficult, but it's a way of them gently introducing them to the scrutiny and the interest that they're going to be receiving.
And George went to Lord's with his father.
Yes.
They've been to see the tennis. I mean,
Yes.
it's not, and it's kind of an almost kind of subtle way of doing it. So it's less. I mean, the spotlight on them is a little less. They're distracted by the sport. It's quite a clever way of doing it.
They're very clever about the way they do it. You'll remember around the time of the coronation as well, they went to a centre, a scout centre, where the children were driving diggers and taking part in archery lessons and things like that. And that was Prince Louis's first official public engagement, but without him really realising it, because it was fun, it was play, it was something that they were interested in. And that is their way of gently, because they know they've got to prepare the children for the lives ahead, but they also want to do it while protecting them at the same time. And
it's the same kind of philosophy by which Kate took lots of pictures of them that were used officially herself, so that they wouldn't have to have these kind of formal photographic sessions.
It's very clever, because she takes the photographs to mark things like their birthdays, for example, and releases those photographs. It means they don't then have to stand for an official photo call every year. They're not put in front of the cameras in the same way that we know Harry has complained about numerous photo calls. So she protects them in that way, and she also gets beautiful photographs because it's mummy behind the camera.
Absolutely, all very relaxed for everybody. Sarah, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.